Thanks be to God for Phil, who's always so able and capable to interpret the wonderful words of life through our scriptures to us. Now, I just happen to know that Phil is a younger child. He has an older brother. And it was so amazing just now, as Phil was telling the story, to look out at all of you. And I saw some younger children smiling, and I saw some older children nodding their heads. So even though this story is so familiar to us, it increases in power, I think, each time that I hear it. There's always something in this story that I haven't heard before. And more than likely, every time I hear it, and I don't know if you do this, but I'll switch the character that I've identified with in the past. The story is so multifaceted and dimensional. There's something new every time. And I've joked in the past that I've preached from this text so often over the years that I have identified with every character in the story except the fatted calf. And I'm not going to preach from the point of view of the fatted calf today either. The story is a near-perfect one for this season of Lent. The younger son goes off and makes an alien of himself by leaving home and becoming a stranger in a strange land. The oldest son, too, although he stays home, also makes an alien of himself by staying in his father's land, but refusing to come inside the household to be restored to wholeness. Through it all, the father waits with unending patience and welcomes everyone home with boundless compassion. If Lent is a time to examine our sense of alienation and our deepest longings, however dormant, to come back home again, then this story is the centerpiece of our deep need for reconciliation, repentance, and certainly for homecoming. Now, I know no one here will think of this as a surprise, but I am the oldest child in my family of origin. If you ask my siblings about me or my co-workers, they would almost certainly tell you all about how I'm an oldest child. My siblings will tell you I am their big sister. I'm known in my family as the trailblazer, the responsible one, and the one who always wants to work hardest to get things done. We all went to the same high school, so my siblings followed behind me, for better or worse. To this day, they can tell me the grades I got on all my English papers and what I did for senior skip day. On the other hand, I have no idea how they fared and haven't a single story to tell you about their high school years. So I've always over-identified with the eldest child in this story, without having very much sympathy for the younger, irresponsible children who, in my eyes, had way, way too much fun. Jesus is a clever and wise storyteller. He knows that inside each of us, these primary identities and conflicted emotions exist. The lost and the found, the wanderer and the homesteader, the rule breaker and the duty keeper, the desire for wildness and the need to play it safe. It is easy to get lost in this story because it offers so many levels of richness to an individual. Memories come forward when we hear this story, and old stories emerge. I recall the summer that I graduated from high school. I decided that I was going to have some fun. I stayed out late every night and borrowed the family car just a bit too often. I was having a great time and spreading my wings whenever I could before I flew away finally for college. A group of us, there was a group of young women who got together that summer, and we went to the Salvation Army store and we bought an old tent that we were going to bring to the beach and set up and live in it for a week. I stayed out late the night before, and I had to get up early in the morning to rummage around the house to pack my things. I was going around the house, pulling things out of drawers and sleeping bags out of closets and trying to sneak around very quietly, and suddenly there was my mother standing before me. "How can you go to the beach this week? Don't you think you should stay home for a while and do some work around here?" I'm absolutely sure, I don't remember what it was, but I'm sure I said something insanely stupid and probably pretty cocky, because I saw my mother's hand go up in reaction. And as it did, mine went up as well, and I caught her slap in mid-air. And we stood that way for a moment, and then I let go, and I got my things, and I ran out of the house and up the street for my ride, leaving things as they were. I don't remember a thing about that long week at the beach. I'm sure in my headstrong oldest daughter way, I had some sort of fun. We spent most of the day frying on the beach, that's what we called it in those days, and most of the night cooling off and walking and talking with our friends along the long pier to the end and back again. This was in Holland, Michigan. But when the week ended and we packed up to go home, I began to get anxious and worried about what might be waiting for me. It was late at night, again, when I opened the door and set my sandy sleeping bag in the front hall. As I entered the den, my mother was watching Johnny Carson, sitting in a chair and darning my father's socks. "Hi, honey. Welcome home. Did you have a good week?" I will always wonder what she went through to arrive to such a state of acceptance and calm. I wonder what that long week was like for this woman who was watching her children grow up and getting ready to leave her nest and fly away in their own lives. I wonder how she got the courage to move through her own deep emotions, to arrive at the place where she needed to be, and to be able to say the words I needed to hear in order to come home again. Henry Nouwen, the great Dutch theologian and priest, has written about this story of the prodigal son perhaps more than any other writer or spiritual leader. His own father was stern and withholding, and I am sure that Henry had a deep need in his life to figure out what his life was about and what his own need for love looked like in the midst of his life. He has written that in order to achieve the love of God, that we must explore 3 aspects of faith in our spiritual lives. The first, and if you follow these, you will see that most likely the father in the story went through these same movements. The first is being willing to grieve. Besides, for our personal grief, the things that we carry in our lives, through our life, the things that break our hearts and cause us deep pain, grief also asks us to allow the sins of the world to pierce our hearts and move us to be willing to shed tears on behalf of the world. As we comprehend the deep pain of the world, violence, war, poverty, abuse, sorrow, when we think of these things and let ourselves be moved to grieve our own part in it, then we may begin to pray. Grieving, says Nouwen, is an act of prayer. I wonder now how many tears my mother had to shed before coming to awareness of the compassion that she needed to give to me and that only she could offer on that summer night. The second way toward unconditional love is learning the practice of forgiveness, and that's what we're talking about this week on our Lenten journey. Forgiveness coming from the heart is very difficult, especially if you have felt deeply wronged and just know you're in the right. But Jesus reminds us of the well of forgiveness when he tells us, forgive 70 times 7. Do the math. We have a tendency to hold on to our opinions, our feelings, and our grudges. And sometimes, even sometimes, when we say to someone, I forgive you, we are still secretly holding on to what we believe is right. And we take pride in that moment of being the bigger person who can say the words. But somehow, I believe that this is not the kind of forgiveness we need to give, nor is it the kind we need to receive. God's forgiveness is in sharp contrast. It is unconditional and does not demand a thing in return. God's forgiveness is empty of self-seeking, such a thing for us humans, and simply exists for the good of all creation. Our human forgiveness is bound on all sides by our need for attention, our need to be right, and our strong egos. But every movement toward honest forgiveness is a step toward compassion. And finally, for Nouwen, the last way toward love is the gift of generosity. We see it so clearly in the story. The father gives his children everything. The younger son receives his inheritance early, abuses it, and is welcomed home again. The older son already has it all. It's right there on the farm, including his father's love and an unchanging role in his father's life. Yet he is resentful and sullen. The grace-filled father glides over him like a mother hen with compassion and love. It is here that this story becomes more than a human story to us about forgiveness. Jesus reminds us in this moment that God's love is more generous than we deserve, made up of patience, goodness, joy, and compassion. God's love is divine love, and it is the love we crave, the fulfillment of our great longing as human beings, one who is with us and for us, no matter who we are or how we behave. As Phil reminded us this morning in the words of Romans, nothing can separate us from God's love. So this brings our story full circle. Our acts of compassion open our lives to each other and are born out of our willingness to grieve and our willingness to forgive as we have been forgiven. We learn to love because we have been loved first. It is God who runs to us when we are far off. It is God who is always putting arms of mercy around us, kissing our troubled faces with us before we walk up the road to home. Jesus, I believe, told this story to remind us that we belong to God. We belong to God, and we are always being welcomed home again and again into the household of justice, compassion, generosity, and love. We most often think of that word prodigal as representing extravagant wastefulness and recklessness, as in the profligate prodigal son who spends all his dad's money and squanders his own life. If that is the case, then the story really is about the compassionate father, for he spends his love freely and extravagantly, as if he has more than enough for everyone. The compassionate father in the story lavishes his love upon his children without regard, never wondering whether that love will be returned. And the compassionate mother opens the door and welcomes the daughter home again with little words of kindness. Welcome home, honey. How was your week? The work of Lent is to be willing to grieve the world and to pray on behalf of all those who suffer. The work of Lent is to learn the gift of forgiveness of those we have hurt and for those who have sinned against us. And eventually, the work of Lent is to break open, to trust and to grow in the generosity of God, who welcomes all of us home again and again and again. Amen.